development. I worked at Wolfram Research for about 6 years on Wolfram Alpha, and then I got into iOS development, and that's what I'm currently doing. So I'm an iOS software engineer right now. So I have kind of a mixed background. I'm not a medical professional, or I don't do research in medicine. All this for me is just a side project, a hobby, just something that I find very interesting. And this, as the title says, is a work in progress. So I've been using a Fitbit for almost 2 years, and I've been collecting my blood pressure every morning with a Withings cuff, and I've been collecting my weight daily. And I've been collecting all this data, and really, I haven't really been engaged with that data. I haven't looked into the data or visualized it or interacted with it very much. It's been something that I've been putting it off. I've been wanting to do that for a while. And so I started doing that in the last couple of weeks. And so I'm going to share with you what I've done so far. And the hope is that this can be a jumping off point for further discussion within the group. And Will and I at the end will cover some discussion points that hopefully can lead to further discussion. And another thing is that we're definitely very interested in, if any of you, or if you have friends or colleagues who might be interested in presenting, by all means let us know. Or if you have ideas for topics or things you'd like to see us do, please let us know, either now or through the Meetup site or whatever works best. So like I mentioned, I have been using the Fitbit for a while. It collects data on your physical activity, steps through an accelerometer, a gyroscope, and a magnetometer. And it stores that data on a frequency of about 1 minute. And you can actually access that data, which I've done, and I'll show you some charts of that. You can download it through the web with a premium service or through an API. I've also been collecting my blood pressure and heart rate daily for about a year with the Withings blood pressure cuff. There is a website. Unfortunately, they're phasing it out, so they're not taking any new members or users. It's called Ask Me Every, and it's pretty cool. It's very simple. You register and you log in, and you say, at 10 a.m. every day, send me a text message or an email asking me this question that I will then answer. And so I've done that with my weight, the number of miles I've ran, how many drinks I've had. I'm not sure why I did that. And maybe how much I spent in that day or something like that. And then in January, when I started commuting, I got an automatic device. I won't be talking about that today, but I've just started, I've cracked into their API and downloaded all my data, so that's something I hope to explore in the future. So why am I doing this? What are my goals? I think that's a great question, and it should be asked. I don't think it's a great answer, actually. For me, it's just, I'm doing this because I enjoy it. So I'm a developer and scientist, as I said. I enjoy working with data, it's doing analysis, playing with gadgets, and writing code. And so really it's just, can I look at my own data and discover anything? Or come up with some new way of visualizing that information? I do have a long-term goal. What actually got me into iOS development was I wanted to build an app that I could use on the iPhone to record what I was doing at any time during the day. So an activity tracker. And so my long-term, and I actually built that device, or the app, and this is an example of 1 day of data. So I actually collected data down to a granularity of about a minute, like going to the toilet, for example, or having breakfast, or jogging, or whatever. But obviously recording that on a device that you have to interact with is probably not scalable and just not doable. So I'm interested in using sensors to automate that. So that's kind of one of the things that motivates me, is I'm interested in that problem space. But what I'm going to cover today is Fitbit data. So I tapped into their API and downloaded all of my data down to 1 minute level. And then I'll show you some preliminary visualizations, and then also quickly go over the blood pressure, heart rate stuff. And also comparing that to NHANES, and I'll come back to that, reference data set, which is, I think, an interesting issue to explore. So I don't know, how many people in the audience have a Fitbit? So, I don't know, about a third. So if you have a Fitbit, this is what you're presented with in terms of the data and the visualization. On the web, they have a nice website, and it shows you can look at the steps broken down for a given day, the totals, and then they also do calculations to try to assign calories and miles and so forth. They also, if you have friends, you can connect with them and see their progress, and we'll come back to that. I think that's actually a really important facet of this whole space. And then they have an iPhone app as well. You can access a Fitbit data. You can download it, but to download it, it requires a premium subscription, which is $50 a year. I'm tempted to do that. I don't know, has anyone in the audience done that before? $50 for their premium service. It looks interesting. You can certainly, one advantage is you can download the data, but they also do things like show you your results relative to other Fitbit users, which I think is a really cool idea. So that's what tempts me to subscribe to that, but I don't currently. Instead, they also have a developer API, which is free, so that's how I've accessed my data. If you go to dev.fitbit.com, and just briefly, the summary of steps: you would sign up for a developer account. You need to register an app, and really all that is a project. So even if you aren't going to build an actual app, I think they understand that. Just come up with some name of an app, and register that, and you will get a client key and client secret, which you need to access their API on the web. Have a look at their documentation, obviously. This particular documentation page describes how to access the data with a 1 minute granularity. And it turns out that their API is turned off by default for that level of granularity. But all you need to do is send them an email and just ask them if you can have access. That's what I did, and it was a 1 day turnaround, and they gave me access. So it wasn't a big deal. There are a number of library wrappers. I used the Python one, and I forked it and added a method to access this intraday time series, which no one had done, and then I put in a pull request, and they're still evaluating it, I guess. And then the other step, final step, I guess, is to access this type of data for yourself, you need to authenticate yourself as a user to that app that you've registered to get the appropriate keys necessary. And then I also have code that I put on. It's on my GitHub repo of JamieInfinity/QS that has an example. It's an IPython notebook. So if you make a request, like the one up above, you will get back a JSON data set that looks like this. At the top, it gives you the summary for the day, so the date, and then the total number of steps, and then it gives you a time series per minute. So this is a plot of the full data set. So down on the bottom, I have the months. Each tick is the beginning of a month, and then the time of day, and it's all right there visualized. So I mean, that's one advantage of accessing your own data. They don't show a visualization like this on their website. So once you have access to that data, you can really dig in and start thinking of ways to visualize it that might be more interesting or insightful. And maybe they don't do it for scalability reasons or something like that.
Hey, Jamie?
Yeah.
Look around January or February of 14, and it looks like all going to the right, it became more fragmented.
You're exactly right. You're jumping the gun.
Sorry.
You're exactly right. So that's one of the things, just by looking at this, you can see patterns. So I moved to St. Louis on February 17th, so you can see here, this looks different than everything else. And then I moved here, and I'll show you again, the day I moved, like, there's lots of steps on that day, obviously. I went to South by Southwest, so during that time, it's sprawled out throughout the day. I'm walking kind of all day. I lost my Fitbit for about, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. They sent me a replacement for free, which was awesome. And then that's the transition that you're talking about. So January 21st of this year, I started commuting out to Monsanto. I work at Asynchrony as a software engineer, as I said, and I got put on an off-site project which required me to drive instead of walk to work, because I live downtown. And so my behavior, my habits changed, and you can see that. So during that period, I was walking to work, and you can see, these yellow are walking to work, lunchtime, walking home, and then the pattern totally changes around that time period. And then I ran in the half marathon on Sunday. I'm still sore. I'm surprised I have any energy at all. And you can kind of see that activity. So all the red is me running. I tend to run in the morning. And then one of the interesting things to try to quantify that transition a little bit more is if I take all of the steps in this period and I bend them up into bends. So how many minutes did I walk, 100 steps per minute, and then put that in a bucket. And basically do that to build up a distribution for that time period. And do the same for the other time period. You can see quite a difference. It clearly indicates that I was spending more time walking. And it also kind of defines that I tend to walk at that rate with some spread centered around some value. And I tend to jog at that rate. And that's fairly consistent. And then the other times, I'm just doing what I'm doing now, which is maybe walking at 10 feet and then stopping and sitting down for an hour or whatever. You can also visualize this through a calendar view. I think these have become increasingly more popular with like D3JS. I should mention that all these visualizations are done with Mathematica, which probably isn't a surprise because I used to work at Wolfram. I'm also interested in JavaScript and D3JS as well, to make it more interactive. But so there's a calendar view, and you can kind of see. So I'll try to highlight. This is on Sunday. There's the marathon. Unfortunately, there are a bunch of yellow strips in there because I kind of hit a wall of about 8 miles and had to walk off and on, which was really sad. Here's the day I moved to St. Louis, so just a bunch of steps kind of spread throughout the day. This is kind of funny. I was at a conference in a hotel and I lost it the night before. And then I went back and got it the next evening. But that day, someone who works at the hotel found it, and apparently, they're walking around, maybe they were cleaning rooms or whatever, but they chalked up about 19,000 steps on it. This is another outlier, Christmas Day. Just taking it easy. This is more of a typical day, the kind of turquoise days. So you can see a walk to work. So this is during that other period when I was working downtown. I would walk to and from lunch and then walk home, maybe stop in at Culinaria, and maybe I would go jogging in the morning. So there's a case where I went running, but kind of a similar pattern. Here's a more recent one. So walk to my car instead of walk all the way to work. But Monsanto has a campus where you have to park quite a ways away in Chesterfield. And so actually you can get in some steps, which is kind of nice, to walk from the parking lot to your office. And this is somewhat of an atypical day, but I went for a run, and then I played volleyball in the evening. And so you can see all kind of that spread of lots of steps. I also tried to explore other ways to visualize the data. So putting it on a clock, is it's more cognitively resonant with how we think about time, I guess. And then you can do something like even show an entire week as well. So you can see, like, I went running in the mornings, and then on the weekends I would get up later and go running. So some of the things I hope to do to continue this project, I would like to actually analyze and look for habits and patterns of behavior. I don't think it would be that hard at all, actually. You could do some feature extraction on a given day to basically put it into a vector space and then do a cluster analysis. And I think that would be interesting if you pulled out an app and it showed you, like, today it looks like you're on a trajectory for this kind of typical day, or maybe you should kick it up a notch, and that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then actually, and I'll come back to this, NHANES is a reference data set, but they actually there were a couple of years where they collected activity monitoring. And I downloaded it. It's like 2 gigabytes of data, but I haven't started actually looking into that yet. And I'm almost done, so I'll quickly go through
You're good on time.
The blood pressure, heart rate, weight data. So I have this Withings cuff, and I've been collecting that data. I started out in the morning and evening, and then I couldn't keep up with that. So I'm only doing the mornings now, and I'll take 3 measurements just to try to get a spread, because actually there's quite a bit of spread when you make that measurement. It can even be 10 points or more. But they also, it's kind of similar to Fitbit. They have a pretty nice web site with the data, or the iPhone app. But I mean, actually, I think you could do a lot better than this visualization. And so accessing the data is very easy. From the app, you can email all of the data. It's not a big data set, so you can just email it as a CSV or download it from their site for free. And so this is my data for blood pressure. I'm showing the systolic and diastolic. I applied a Gaussian smoother with a width of 2 days, roughly, and capturing the max and min so that you can actually see that spread of the values. The period here, when I upgraded the app, it had a problem syncing the data and probably doing a data migration, and it lost about a month's worth of data, unfortunately. And then in this period, it changed the way that it was working. It used to work that you could start it and it would do 3 measurements and it would actually record each one individually. And then all of a sudden it decided that they changed the behavior. It would just record the mean. And I actually wanted all 3 values. So I stopped using that function and now I just collect 3 values separately so I can get that spread. But yeah, there's my data and it's a little bit on the high side, sadly. And then this is my heart rate. I guess I should mention too that at the time, I think it was around March, somewhere around this time when the data disappeared. The data actually disappeared later, like in May. So I was actually collecting this data and looking at it, and I had a root canal. And it's really weird because leading up to that root canal, it seemed to be 25 or 30. Capture that at all because the data was lost. But I think that's interesting. If I had maybe some kind of persistent pain that maybe drove, I don't know, a high blood pressure, and then once it was relieved, I don't know. And then again, my heart rate, and this is my weight. So those are the raw data points, and then I apply a Gaussian smoothing with roughly a week window. You can see while I was preparing for the marathon, it was dropping. And unfortunately, and I felt this on Sunday, I kind of peaked in my training, and I started to gain a little bit more weight before the marathon, which is probably not a good thing. So NHANES that I've been referring to, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, it's been going on for, I think, decades. It's part of the CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. I know about this from working at Wolfram Alpha because we put this data set into Wolfram Alpha. So that's how I'm familiar with it. But basically, they go around the country and they collect data on all body measurements and blood screenings and all kinds of things. A couple of years they gave people activity monitors, and they collected data on that as well. And this data is freely available, and it's a survey with a very specific sample design and documentation. So there's sample weights that you apply to each point. It's all fairly well documented. And so you can do things like, so this is the data, which starts out being for, the entire data set is about 70,000 participants over a span of 7 of these cycles. And then I filtered it to just adult males, so between the ages of 18 and 65. And so you get out this distribution for weight. And then I did another filtering on males between the ages of 38 and 48, so I lie right in the middle. And also my height, which is 5'10". And so that group of people is a little bit narrower of a distribution than the other one. But it's actually not that dissimilar. What I didn't have time to do is extract out the mean and the standard deviation and the 95 percentile like reference range. But you can easily extract that from here. So the reason I did that is to give context. So heart rate and then blood pressure as well. And so mine tends to lie kind of right there, close to 130, and then close to 80. So it's a little, well, I don't have the number, so it's not way off. But I guess what typically is reported is if it's, I guess that number changes, right? Sometimes people say 120, 125, or 130. So I mean, it's useful to actually get reference data and try to get some context and interpretation of how you compare to the rest of the population. So that's basically the end of my part of the slides, and then